So today we're going to finish reading about the Transcontinental Railroad. Remember yesterday we learned that they were building a railroad across the United States. One company was building it from west to east, another was going east to west. It's kind of a competition, and the winner was going to receive more money than the other. And they talked about the reason that they were able to expand it to California, having to do with gold being found, right? People were very excited about this because it was able to connect them, able to carry their goods across the country, and really was just turning out to be very beneficial to the United States. Well, today we're going to finish reading that. I'm going to start on page 17. So go ahead and get your texts open, your consumables, to the story, and we'll start off on page 17. The first thing we're going to look at is the price of progress. The progress of the railroad was not celebrated by all. The Plains Indians were opposed to workers laying tracks across their sacred land. Opposed. That must mean since they didn't want it, they were against it. Because their land was sacred. The Sioux, Arapaho, Cheyenne, and other Plains nations had good reason. The land and the American bison, or buffalo, that roamed the land were essential to their way of life. The Plains Indians lived by hunting bison and other wild animals. Bison in particular provided the food and clothing the Native American tribes needed. At the time, enormous herds roamed the plains. However, the bison damaged tracks and got in the way of the trains, so railroad workers were ordered to kill them. This was not the only way the railroad was destroying the American Indian way of life. Some settlers were building new towns along the rail lines. To protect their homeland, some Native American war parties began to attack railroad workers and new settlers. In return, soldiers attacked both warring and peaceful Native American settlements. In the end, as a result of the bison's decline and the encroachment, it's a big word, of white European settlers, and encroachment means just the people coming at them, getting into their space, into their territory, taking over. The Plains nations could no longer sustain their way of life. Eventually, they were forced onto reservations by the United States government. So when I think about that, I'm going to kind of pull to the side because it wasn't very easy for me to annotate in this tiny space. But some people were against the railroads, right? And I'm just going to abbreviate railroads. Not everybody was for them. The Indians and different tribes of Indians were upset because they were losing their land, right? So Indians losing land and their supplies, right? They're losing the bison, the buffaloes. That was Indians losing land and buffalo. Sorry, they were upset because this is their life, and these are taking over, and these, the buffalo are just roaming the way that they should, and they're getting in the way, and so now the people are killing them, and it just was not what they were looking for. They wanted their own land, they wanted to do their way of life, but because of this railroad, they weren't able to do that anymore. Okay, moving on to page 18. The picture says, "Done. The last rail is laid, the last spike driven. The Pacific Railroad is completed." That was said by Leland Stanford, who was the governor of California, May 10th, 1869. People had expected the Transcontinental Railroad to be completed in 1876. Instead, it was completed in 1869. That's pretty important. 7 years early. Remember, they were fighting against who's going to get more, so they really sped up their process and worked through the nights just so that they could lay more track than the other company. The two railroad companies that had laid the tracks agreed to meet to lay the last rail at Promontory Point, Utah, on May 10th. On the big day, hundreds of people gathered. The governor of California, Leland Stanford, drove in the golden spike that joined together the Central Pacific and Union Pacific Railroads. The crowd cheered while bands played. Less than a week after the last rail was laid, train service began. The trip from New York to San Francisco took about a week and cost far less than the long journeys by sea or across land. It cut the price of cross-country travel from $1,000 to $150, making the trip much more affordable for the public. So I'm going to highlight that. So that's really important. That's a very, very big difference amount of money. I can see why it's much more affordable. As a result, more settlers rode the trains west on their way to building new homes, farms, and communities. The Transcontinental Railroad changed the nation. By linking east with west, the railroad helped unite the nation. Americans began to feel they were citizens of the United States, not just members of their local community. So the Indians were the only people that were really against this, but everybody else was for it because there were so many benefits of this railroad. I mean, think about the railroad today and think about the benefits that we have here. You know, we live probably, roughly 30 miles from the city of Chicago, and it's a very quick train trip to go all the way downtown, to have a day downtown. And then we could go the other way, right? My brother used to live in southern Illinois, far down south, like 6 hours away when he went to college, and I used to take the train to go visit him. You know, that's the way to go. You don't have to worry about traffic and things like that. It's very, very beneficial. So what you guys are going to do now is you're going to go onto your slides and you're going to answer the questions, the comprehension questions that go with this, the rest of this, right? I want them done in complete sentences. I did not start these for you like I did yesterday, but it's very important that you use complete sentences. Once you're done answering those questions, you will notice that the next activity that you're going to do today is to go back to the writing that you started yesterday and continue the summary of now the entire text, now that you've read the entire thing. And so you can click on the blue button on the corresponding slide, and what that's going to do is take you back to your writing. Now, your writing yesterday was a summary. Today, you're adding summary because we finished reading it, adding to it so you can tell the end of the story now. And also you can include, your opinion, but make sure that you use details. Do you think that this was a good thing? Do you think this was a bad thing? How do you feel about the Indians? How do you feel about, the settlers that moved, came in, went west? You can include all of that. Okay, so that will be your assignment for the day. Let me know if you have any questions.